On June 30, 2023, the United States aviation network suffered a quiet, devastating collapse. Within 12 hours, major airlines canceled over 3,000 flights. No major hurricanes were on the radar. No cyber attacks had disabled the FAA's networks. It was a clear, sunny summer Friday, one of the busiest travel days in modern history. The disruption didn't come from a technical failure or a weather front. It came from a single number, 1,500. In the weeks that followed, ticket prices surged past $900 for basic domestic routes. Regional carriers shut down entire operations because they had nowhere to find captains. SkyWest declared force majeure, a legal term that simply means we cannot fulfill our contracts because the world has changed. Parents missed weddings, business deals fell apart, and smaller cities were suddenly cut off from the global grid. The government attempted emergency regulatory adjustments, but the interventions only bought days. Every one of those parked regional Embraer and Bombardier jets is fully functional. The hardware inside them is worth billions of dollars, and none of it is moving, because the aviation industry understood something the rest of the world had been quietly ignoring. You don't need a global pandemic to paralyze the aviation industry. You just need to block the right door. The path to the cockpit sits directly between a trainee's final commercial license check ride and the left seat of a commercial passenger jet. At its narrowest point, it is exactly 1,500 hours of flight time, a multi-year financial grind. Through that regulatory gap passes every single commercial pilot in the United States. That is the threshold for everything the flying public consumes. United's flights exit through it. Delta's, Americans, Southwest's, the business travelers keeping multinational corporations running, the families going on vacation, the cargo flights carrying medical supplies, all of it funnels through this one narrow corridor before reaching 30,000 feet. There is no meaningful alternative route. The process is essentially a dead end, a highway with one heavily guarded toll booth. Accelerated pathway programs exist, but they are expensive, highly selective, and handle only a fraction of what normally flows through the system. Nobody built flight academies because for most of the last century, the cockpit was always full. Why spend billions solving a problem that didn't seem to exist? Mainline carriers get nearly all of their regional feed through this narrow passage. The entire technology economy gets its shipping through the same pipeline. But travel is only part of it. A third of the world's valuable commerce moves by air. Organic tissue for hospital transplants, highly sensitive semiconductor microchips, and crucial industrial components all depend on specialized air freight. When this passage closes, shipping prices spike, which means consumer prices follow, in towns nowhere near a major international airport for people who have never even stepped foot on a commercial airplane. The pilot training pipeline isn't a transportation story, it's a civilization story. A business owner in Idaho, a factory technician in South Carolina, a medical patient in Ohio, none of them have ever seen a flight logbook. None of them know what an airline transport pilot certificate is or how it functions. All depend on it staying open, flowing through a gap that a single regulatory rule can close with a historical signature. Every government on Earth knows this. Every major global airline has wargamed it, and absolutely nobody has done anything about it. Because it turns out, the modern aviation industry isn't built on innovation and efficiency. It's built on a 50-year-old hostage situation. In the 20th century, the commercial airline industry found a massive glitch in the economics of labor. They realized they didn't need to pay to train an entire generation of pilots to own the skies. They just needed to own the exit. They watched as the United States military, fueled by the Cold War, minted thousands of disciplined, trained aviators every year at the taxpayers' expense. Control the exit of the military bases, control the civilian airline trade. The major airlines held on to this model for decades. If you own the exit of the military pipeline, the entire flying workforce has to ask you for a job. But by the time the military footprint finally shrank, exhausted by structural reorganizations and technological shifts towards unmanned systems, two forces moved in to fill the gap: the civilian flight schools and the regional carriers. Both were large, both were ambitious, and both were convinced that they should be the dominant force in this waterway. In the 1980s and 1990s, they fought a grinding economic war. Regional airlines underbid each other for mainline contracts, trying to cut each other's income. To keep tickets cheap, they pushed pilot wages down to near poverty levels. Starting first officers at regional airlines were making as little as $18,000 a year, often relying on food stamps while living in shared crash pads. The pipeline stayed open, barely. What makes this training geography so significant is this: the major airlines don't just border the pipeline, they own islands inside it. They own the regional carriers that act as gatekeepers, sitting in the middle of the world's most important shipping lane, positioned to monitor and, when necessary, challenge everything that moves through. You cannot secure a pipeline when your business model is based on exploiting the junior workforce inside it. For 30 years, the airlines have lived there, and they know exactly where the pressure points are. But the most powerful aviation authority on Earth is sitting just 30 minutes away in Washington, D.C. It has been there for decades, specifically because of this industry, specifically for moments of structural failure. So why didn't it work? The FAA, backed by the immense political power of Congress, controls the airspace. Control centers, advanced systems, by any measure, one of the most powerful forces ever assembled in a single industry. When the crisis hit, they moved immediately. But the training pipeline isn't built for a bureaucratic heavy hand. It is a knife in a dark room. Swarms of inexperienced instructors blurring into flight schools, training loans cheap enough to scatter by the hundreds, designed specifically to build hours. Securing a crew takes weeks, burning through them takes hours. And even if they cleared every hurdle, the airplane still wouldn't move. Because the real lock on this cockpit door isn't a lack of airplanes or advanced flight simulators. It's a phone call in a gray office building in Washington, D.C., or a union headquarters in Chicago. The moment a conflict begins over pilot supply, underwriters of safety review their exposure. They raise safety issues in the media, and if a single incident happens, they pull their cooperation entirely. Without the cooperation of the pilot unions, no commercial captain on Earth will fly. Not because they are cowards, because the aircraft isn't cleared, the flight schedule isn't cleared, the crew isn't cleared, there is no agreement. The FAA can authorize accelerated training programs, it can support university pathways, but it cannot make a major labor union sign a contract that devalues the licenses of its members. The cockpit is open. We have new airplanes sitting on the tarmac. My captains won't fly them with an inexperienced pilot next to them. We'll guarantee their safety. Who guarantees our contracts and wages if we let you flood the market with cheap labor? This is the trap, and the major unions have understood it for decades. You don't need to physically block flight schools. A single piece of legislation like the 1500 rule accomplishes it. Even the rumor of a regulatory change is enough to spark labor negotiations. The market doesn't wait for a strike to happen. It panics at the first sign of labor unrest. The flights stop, and the pressure to resolve this lands not on the corporate executives who created the low-wage system, but on the passengers who had nothing to do with starting the fight. The average domestic traveler from Ohio, the vacationer from Florida, none of them fired a pilot or cut a regional wage. None of them had a position in this structural dispute, but their travel plans were running on a clock. The global reserve of available pilot hours was already being drawn down fast. The industry had enough reserve pilots to buy days, not weeks.
On one side of this equation, the most profitable airlines in history were sitting with hundreds of parked jets, completely unable to fly them, engines running, gates leased, completely unable to fix the human bottleneck. On the other side, regional airports with no alternative transit, no political leverage, and no part in this conflict were watching their runways empty, waiting for some authority to blink. Nobody had a move. Everyone needed one. At some point, the system always reopens. The airline's own profitability runs on ticket revenue, and that revenue exits through the same cockpits they just left empty. The leverage works both ways. So the acute crisis ends, the jets move again, and almost immediately, the hard questions about how the global aviation network ended up this exposed get quietly set aside. Because fixing the pipeline costs billions,